Call this meeting to order. Today's roundtable will begin the process to identify future need to inform development of the new WARDA, which will be talked about all this year. Part of next year, we would like input, certainly, but be sure that we will keep this in mind when we develop WARDA. I'd like to start off by thanking Ms. Mercasel Powell. She asked me about coming down here, and this is the first trip I've taken as chairwoman of the subcommittee, and I'm glad she did because it's a beautiful area. And I've begun to realize with the briefing with the Army Corps, with my staff, that this is an area that needs assistance, but I pray that you understand that the budget is not in our hands, it's in the administration's hands. And unless you ask them to up the budget for the Army Corps, although last year they got a bump up, it was not enough for them to do the job we assigned them to. We have projects, many of them, like this, that can't get done because there's not enough budget. So anyway, I just want to thank her and her staff for arranging the round table. And Isla Morada, my first trip down here, I'm glad some of our colleagues couldn't be here. We were supposed to have about 5 more people, members of Congress, and they opted out on us, so it's only Debbie and me. They're lost.
We have the chairwoman, which is the most important thing.
We want to begin the discussion of some of the priorities for the WARDA Act, and to see firsthand what it entails. And I want to thank also the Army Corps of Engineers for the tour they'll be providing us today. Hopefully we'll be able to get a good tour, even with the weather. I'll help provide context for today's roundtable. And it's a great opportunity to demonstrate our commitment in passing the new Water Resources Bill this year, and that will be helpful for us to view and maintain recent successes of enacting a new WARDA bill every 2 years. So far, we've had success. We've done it a couple of years running, and we intend not to stop. I think it's important for the country, and we need input on how we should be able to address it every 2 years. I am pleased we're meeting with a diverse group of stakeholders. I met a couple of you already, and I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you, Mayor, for having us, hosting us. You represent a wide array of backgrounds and interests and within the core mission areas. The commonality between us all is what we want to see: greater investments in our nation's water resources needs. And the Corps of Engineers is more responsive to the needs of the community with a budget to match. It's just working with the Corps, and I've done that for several years. I find them very accommodating, very good to work with, and I'm hoping that they will continue to be criticized, but because of their slow and arduous, expensive process, but they're trying their best with what they have. Assigning the blame for this reality is not an easy task. Certainly the Corps itself must take some of the blame, but we cannot lose sight of our own congressional responsibility for the Corps' current financial situation. Whether for the construction of newly authorized projects for flood control, navigation, or environmental restoration, or the proper upkeep and modernization of our critical water-related infrastructure, both the administration and Congress, and I'm talking about the House and the Senate, Congress together, still seem to think the Corps can do more with less. Yet, if I were to ask you, each and every one of you, if that is true, I'm certainly the answer would be no. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Thank you. As I've said before, if we are serious about having a 21st century infrastructure, including the Corps-related infrastructure, we need to do better than the status quo. The new Water Resources Bill is an excellent opportunity for us to evaluate particular recommendations from you. So I need that input. And from all stakeholders, and take them back and discuss them at the committee and the full committee, and then on to the Senate, and consider them as we work together on the new WARDA bill. I am very much interested in hearing from our witnesses whether they believe their needs are being met by the Corps, and I understand that's not always the case. And if not, what reforms and changes are possible to ensure the Corps may meet their needs. I look forward to working with my colleagues And as the ranking member, Congressman Westerman, he's very good to work with, my colleague. We see eye to eye on most things. And my colleagues on the both sides of the aisle, as we work in earnest in the award of 2020 in a truly bipartisan way. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Mercasel Powell for her statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to start by just thanking our chairwoman for taking the time to fly out here, drive down to Isla Morada to get a clear and firsthand understanding of what we're dealing with here in the Florida Keys and Monroe County and my district in Homestead. Our schedules are crazy, as you can imagine, and Congresswoman Napolitano represents an area in California, a district in California, and for her, yes, on the other, and for her to take, I just want to say thank you, because from the very beginning, she's been so attentive to the needs of our community, always there, listening, trying to see what she can do as chairwoman of the Water Subcommittee to address the issues that we've been dealing with now for decades, I have to say. Thank you for the panelists and for all of our guests for coming here this morning, and for everyone in the room. We'll have a chance at the end to have questions and answers so that you can all participate as well. In South Florida, as we all know, water is life, and virtually every aspect of our lives is connected to a good, clean water quality. We need clean water to drink. We need clean water to be able to fish. We need clean water for our kids to be able to swim. And we need it for our fishing industry, both commercial and recreational. It's a significant driver of tourism, and it also irrigates our farms, our bean, tomato, and strawberries down in Homestead. Part of ensuring that we have enough clean water for all of these important uses is ensuring that we have a healthy water overflow coming down from Lake Okeechobee. And the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, CERP, is our blueprint, has been the blueprint to do exactly that. It's been already 19 years since CERP has been approved, which is why from the minute I got elected, it was one of the top issues that I was going to address. Before I even got sworn in, I spoke with the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, Nita Lowy, to say we need $200 million in funding. I had met with different environmental groups all over the area, and they had said, our request is $173 million. I thought that was an odd number, so we decided to round it up to 200. And I testified in front of the committee, the Water Subcommittee for Appropriations, to showing them pictures of what we had been dealing with the green-blue algae going through the canals, why we needed to complete the largest environmental project approved 19 years ago and still yet to be completed. So I just want to tell you that my objective is to get that passed in the Senate. It's in the Senate. We're waiting for it to come back. And it's been bipartisan, so I hope that we can get that approved. But also to have a continuing line item. I've met with the Army Corps. I've met with different stakeholders. We need to continue that funding so that we can finally complete the project. And the Army Corps has told me that by 2022, 2027, anyways, we'll talk about that. Yes. So I think that we have made some very positive progress, and we're going to take Chairwoman Napolitano to the Everglades National Park so that she can see all the different projects that are aligned there. The Kissimmee project is just about done, with the construction complete on major components around the C111 canal, and we're starting to see some positive benefits in the park and in the Florida Bay. But we still have so much work to do. And time, unfortunately, is a luxury that we just don't have. We've seen massive seagrass die-offs. We've suffered because of the blue-green algae and red tides. Our biodiversity is decreasing. Our precious coral reefs, which has been a passion of mine, the only living barrier reef in the U.S., in the continental United States, has been dying at an alarming rate. So we need to deal with this issue now. That's why I'm so glad that we're starting here today to come together to talk about ways that we can advance ideas on what we can do right by our constituents, our environment, through restoring our Everglades and finding ways, innovative ways, to address sea level rise, like leveraging natural infrastructure. I'm I'm so looking forward to what you have to say, Doctor from FIU, and ensuring that our economy continues to thrive. So with that, I hand it off to Madam Chair to introduce our panelists.
Thank you, ma'am, very much for that. Now proceed to hear from our witnesses who will speak today, and thank all of you for being here and for being accessible. First, the Honorable Deb Gillis, Mayor, Isla Morada, Florida. The Honorable Jose Javier Rodriguez, State Senator, Florida, 3rd, 37th District. Noah Valenstein, Secretary, Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Michael Rubin, Vice President, Government Affairs, Florida Ports Council. Where are you? Oh. Mary Barley, Founding Director, Everglades Foundation. Cheryl Meads, Governing Board, South Florida Water Management District. And Dr. Yayanta Obeisekra. Am I killing?
Can you go get her?
Director, Sea Level Solutions, Associate Director, Institute of Water Environment, Florida International University. We ask that all participants limit their oral remarks to 5 minutes, and we have no timer here, but I have my human timer. Mayor, welcome, and you may proceed.
Thank you, and I appreciate you guys coming today. It's very important to us here in Islamorada. So good morning, I am Deb Gillis. I'm the Mayor of Islamorada, Village of Islands. Welcome to the Florida Keys. It is our home. Islamorada consists of 4 major islands and is about 19 miles long and 2 miles wide at its widest point. The population in Islamorada is roughly about 5,000 permanent residents, but climbs to more than 15,000 during our tourist season. For reference, the Florida Keys is about 126 linear miles long and have a population of 80,000. So you've only traveled about a third of the way through the Keys when you've come here. There's another 86 miles beyond us. Our main source of income, as you stated, is our Keys tourism. Tourism is our lifeblood of our economy, and taxes would be 60% higher without our tourists. Our local fishing economy generates more than $4.5 billion annually and attracts 4 million visitors per year to the Keys. This is all made possible by the waters that surround us. Without the pristine water to drive our water economy business, we have nothing. It is our life. Islamorada alone spent $160 million to protect the water quality by providing advanced wastewater treatment, central sewers. The Florida Keys, with only 80,000 taxpayers, spent close to $1 billion on sewers. If you do the math, you can tell we are very serious about our nearshore waters and the cleanliness of them. We are proud to have worked closely with the Army Corps of Engineers in implementing our central sewers, and we have been recognized by the Corps as being one of the best performing environmental infrastructure projects in their portfolio. Sewage isn't the only factor in water quality. We are also implementing stormwater management projects and working on canal restoration. Hurricane Irma, 2 years ago, devastated the vast majority of our canals, which is a critical part of our nearshore water quality. We know that stormwater will be the more expensive than our sewers, and the canals are in desperate need of help. We have had some relief in the canal cleanup through the NRCS, but this needs to be an ongoing process. Our island chain is surrounded by the Florida Keys National Sanctuary, which is charged with protecting 2,800 square nautical miles of the Florida Keys water. Everybody thinks of waters as the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, but here in Islamorada, Florida Bay is literally in our backyard. The water from Florida Bay is also part of and affects the marine sanctuary. The sanctuary is home to the 3rd largest barrier reef in the world. Pristine water is needed to support that reef. The reef is not only home to millions of animals, but also as a protection for the islands from surge waters from the hurricanes. Florida Bay gets its life from the Everglades. Without the flow of adequate water through the Everglades, Florida Bay will die, and so will the economy of the Keys. seagrass dies, and then the fish nurseries disappear, and then the fish population declines, and what else can I say? With that, Everglades funding is a must, but it's not just to continue where it is. It must be increased, and projects must be expedited. The Everglades water needs to travel south and supply the needed fresh water to the Florida Bay. When you take your tour this afternoon, you'll see firsthand why this is so critical. Finally, sea level rise is a reality for us. Every month at high tide and during the spring and fall, during king tides, we have properties and roads that go underwater. I have actually provided a couple pictures to show this effect of what's happening. And this isn't during the storm. This is on a regular basis. Thank you. We are working on comprehensive plan changes to help mitigate these rising waters, but additional help is needed. As you can tell, water is the life of the Keys, and this committee is very important to us. Thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you for your testimony, Mayor Gillis. And now I will let Honorable Jose Javier Rodriguez, State Senator, have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Congresswoman, Mayor. It's an honor to be here today. This is extremely important for our state. And I think I'm aware the timekeeper is behind me, so I'm going to try to be as quick as possible. I'll tell you briefly the importance of this to me in the role that I play in the Florida Senate in my district. So I serve on the Agricultural and Natural Resources Sub-Appropriations Committee, and I'm the member that's closest to the Keys geographically who serves on the committee. In addition, I serve 500,000 residents of Miami-Dade County in the Florida Senate. A couple other things about me very briefly. One is I'm on good behavior today. I'm not wearing rain boots. But if this were a state meeting, I wear rain boots at the Capitol this is the third legislative session that I've done so to heighten the urgency on a lot of the issues that we're dealing with respect to climate. The district that I serve includes the Port of Miami. It also includes much of Biscayne Bay. And I have the honor of, in my district, having a Central Everglades Restoration Project, the only one in Miami-Dade County itself. And my district is urban, but we do have part of Everglades Restoration Projects in the southern part of my district. One of the things that I think I wanted to hit maybe 3 points and preface it by really looking at the mission that your city has up there on the wall, because I think that helps orient what it is that brings us all together and why this is a top priority for us. When we talk about the safeguarding our water resources, restoring the flow of the Everglades, when we talk about taking sea level rise and climate seriously, it used to be viewed as an environmental issue. It has become and is an economic issue. It will be, if it's not already in many communities, a justice issue. But one of the things that's extremely important for me is that front and center, it is a public health issue. And for me, that really orients a lot of my advocacy and why I support a lot of the efforts that the Congresswoman is bringing forward. Without going into sort of legislation we have at the state level, I'll just hit on a couple things. One is, one of the things that we are confronting is the continued issue of well injection, whether it's deep well injection or injection into our aquifer. I have been advocating, and many others have as well, that we need to reduce water use where we can, clean it if it's injected, but strive as well to reuse it. And frankly, that's an issue that's extremely important, and probably the county that is probably most important in is Miami-Dade County. We're under a consent decree. Well, not we. The Miami-Dade County government is under a consent decree, and they have until 2025 to do what the county should have done a long time ago with respect to the reuse of water. And I think it's extremely important for us because we have fecal content in Biscayne Bay. we cannot abide. I mean, that, we live and breathe on tourism and commerce, and the health of our water is what we rely on for our quality of life. And so, to the extent that we can have policies that amplify the need to reuse water, clean it, and not deep well inject it. And I think the reason why is because we still don't know all the effects of sending polluted water down. It comes out somewhere. And if we look at maps of where coral reefs are impacted, I think that's a lot of the evidence that kind of anecdotal that we may need on that front. Another issue with respect to Everglades restoration. Sea level, when it comes to sea level rise, particularly in South Florida, Everglades restoration, restoring the natural flow from north of the lake all the way to the Florida Keys, is the most important thing that we can do to buy ourselves more time. Specifically, I'm talking about our aquifer, but the buffer that we get with the fresh water is the best thing we can do to protect our clean water and prevent saltwater intrusion. And one thing that I would say, and I'm trying to be brief, I only have one more point after this, is that when it comes to WRDA, obviously the Everglades system is unique in its size and scope in terms of the project, but to the extent that there can be funding streams that are dedicated to a project, to a program and not a project, so that there can be sort of longer term planning, that would be helpful. The state has been stepping up to the plate. The political will is there. Yeah. And I'll get to the end of it just by saying, again, hitting on the issue of sea level rise, and with respect to how we spend our resources, to be smart about how we do that. We have a chief resilience officer in place now, and one of the things that she was mentioning is that green infrastructure and not just hard concrete infrastructure is something that we should be prioritizing.
Thank you very much, Senator. Next, we will go to Noel Valenstein, Secretary, Florida Department of Environmental Protection.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Certainly, you've come to one of the most beautiful congressional districts in Florida, and we appreciate you coming all the way here. I'll also mention, I thought you said something that was incredibly important prior to the meeting, which was water's not political, right? Water is something we all have to have. It's something that draws California to Florida. It's a commonality between each of the states in the union. It's an issue that's important to Florida. It's important to the world, and it's something we have to work on and view as a top priority every day. And I think you see that in Florida, especially the non-political element. So I just want to mention a few things that are occurring right now in the state to sort of give context to that, and then mention sort of a broader issue for WRDA. In Florida right now, we're sort of, I hope, at the beginning end of an environmental wave that will spread from Florida to the rest of the country. As the Senator mentioned, the new governor has made science a priority, partnerships a priority, and funding a priority, and certainly urgency, which is something I'll mention later. And so Governor DeSantis has recently made Florida, I think, the really only state in the nation with a system of having a both chief science officer to make sure that we're being guided by science in everything we do in the natural resources element. Sometimes that doesn't always happen, unfortunately. And also a chief resiliency officer, making sure that we are on a daily basis talking about climate change and the impacts of sea level rise to Florida, right? And that system is something that I think is unique now to Florida in just the last year. The governor also has said, as you mentioned, you have to have resources if you want to get something done. Not much happens without resources. And so this governor has committed record amounts of funding, $2.5 billion over 4 years. And it was something when we asked for that first installment of $625 million this past year, wondered whether we would actually see that unanimity across political boundaries, and could we get that out of the legislature? It's not always an easy thing to do. And interestingly enough, the legislature won up the governor and actually came up with more than $625 million, thanks to the Senate and also our local appropriates chairman here from this district, Holly Rashine. We also realized we've got to enforce laws, so the governor has created increased inspection, increased enforcement. We have policy proposals right now to have a 50% increase of fines across the board for the environment. We also have increase in regulation and stringency for water quality issues, from septic tank to wastewater to agriculture to stormwater, recognizing how important this is. And I mention all of that to say, it highlights the urgency with which Florida sees the issue of water and also the broad support that we have. And we hope those two things can really move from Florida and reach both from California and Florida and reach together through the center of the United States. Everglades restoration, we hope, will be an example across the world to show that next to one of the largest economies of the world, you can protect a World Heritage site and actually see progress. That takes partnerships. It also takes urgency. And so I'd conclude with saying, I know Cheryl will go through some of the key projects, but holistically speaking, we hope in WRDA we can look for opportunities to do things more quickly, whether it's block grants for states to say, in some instances, the state is able to get projects done more quickly than the Army Corps of Engineers. Let's empower the state to move forward and hold them accountable to do so. Any opportunity we can find to reduce the time it takes to get a project done is going to benefit not just the environment, but also benefit the momentum that we're seeing right now as a state, and hopefully make it easier for you, Madam Chairwoman, to get those resources that we all want to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Valenstein. Mr. Michael Rubin, Vice President of Government Affairs, Florida Ports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I really do appreciate you coming to Florida to talk about this issue. And on behalf of the Florida Ports Council, I can't thank you enough to come down and talk about the opportunities and challenges we face on seaports. Florida's history really is built on the navigable water, I can say. Long before Henry Frymer built a railroad from Daytona to what was then the most populous city, about 1905 Key West, Florida was dependent upon navigable water to not only move commerce, but move individuals around the state of Florida at that time. Oh, I thought it was on. Sorry. Really, the ability is just as important today. Frankly, our ports are, based on most recent economic analysis, we generate 13% of the state's GDP at the ports, support over 900,000 jobs, and which generates about $4.3 billion in tax revenues. If you look at what this committee did, really starting in 2014, when you put caps or goals for HMT use, that has allowed us, in partnership with the state, to invest a significant amount of money in Florida. The economic value really has increased, about a $15 billion increase since that 2014 bill. We've additionally, over 16 million cruise passengers are served by Florida ports. That's about a 4.3 increase since 2014. Florida really is the only state with ports on two vital shipping lanes. We've got both the Gulf and we've got, obviously, the Atlantic. We compete with ports in, obviously, the southeast United States all the way up to New York, not so much in California, the two largest ports there. But I did see with interest the Thursday hearing of the Coast Guard subcommittee that talked about China's maritime Silk Road initiative. I would note that the Chinese are investing rather heavily over on this side of as well. If you look at the Panama Canal, Freeport, Bahamas, Cuba, and Jamaica, they're either operating terminals there or they're the construction managers of a lot of projects there. So it makes it more important for not only the federal government but the state of Florida to invest in the seaports. Really, we've identified about $4 billion worth of projects here in the state of Florida, and that includes seaport infrastructure projects like navigational construction projects at Jacksonville, Port Everglades, and Miami. And really, we need to not only keep up with the Chinese, but keep up
Ahead of them.
keep ahead of them, absolutely, to maintain dominance. And they're looking to, obviously, South America. They're looking to the Caribbean to take over for the way that we operate, and certainly the product coming out of the United States into those areas. Frankly, again, your bipartisan efforts, and this committee has been wonderful at it, have allowed us, really, in our opinion, to transform Florida from sort of an end-of-the-road kind of destination to one of the what we call a global peer of the world. But the work's not done. And as you said, there's a number of projects out there. Frankly, the navigational deepening project at Port Everglades is, I say 20 years, but it may be 30. It could be even going on to 40 by now. It's been going on for quite some time. A lot of studies that continue to do that. That port is a vital fuel port for anybody that's hurricane season knows about fuel. It is a vital fuel port and cargo seaport for Florida's growing population. It provides the fuel not only for the population down here, but provides the fuel for the airports in both Miami and Fort Lauderdale International. The deepening project at Jacksport is in the middle of it and needs to be completed. My good friends, and certainly Basil could talk more about this, but Port Miami has some additional navigational needs. I know they'll be coming before you on that. They've done some deepening there, but they need more deepening to allow for larger cargo vessels to safely transit and offload. And even really absent navigational hazards caused by hurricanes, Florida has ongoing maintenance and operation needs at all our seaports. And again, you all have done a pretty good job with the Army Corps. The Army Corps is a great partner with us on a host of projects. And again, your revisions to WRDA has helped us work with them. Really with respect to moving forward on any WRDA legislation that you may do, I'll start with what this committee has sort of passed out. And Madam Chair, I know you were a sponsor of this, H.R. 2440, the full utilization of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund Act. And if that's not going to pass there, you ought to include it in the WRDA legislation. Frankly, the information put together by your staff on this stuff is fantastic, and we couldn't redo it. I know they've done a great job on it, and both sides have done, certainly are wonderful on it, and we do appreciate it, and certainly whatever we can do with respect to helping you on that issue. In my opinion, the passage of that legislation probably has a more substantial impact on this nation's seaports and waterborne commerce than really any legislation you've passed in quite some time. So we're hopeful that it'll get some traction on both sides. As you know, it's $34 billion and would probably allow for not only dredging of navigational construction projects, but a lot of operation and ongoing maintenance. A couple of other small issues that you certainly would consider in the WRDA really dealt with some more flexibility in working with the Army Corps, including allowing non-federal interests to undertake feasibility studies. We've got some guidance in there that I know that is still a little confusing, that was put up by the Army Corps headquarters, that everybody's still trying to work with on that to certainly allow for, again, non-federal interests, whether that non-federal interest is a state government or whether it's certainly a local government down there. We would hope that, to look at that feasibility study authorization stuff again, allowing for that feasibility study to be undertaken by that non-federal interest. Another one deals with mitigation banks. There's some language, Madam Chair. I'm wrapping up. Mitigation banks, and certainly looking at that one. And again, thank you so much for being here, and whatever assistance you need from us on anything, Madam Chair, we're happy to provide that and any tours you might want.
We'll keep that in mind. Staff informs me that the House Energy and Water appropriations on the Harbor Maintenance Fund markup was $1.69 billion.
Not bad.
$100 million above WRDA's targets, and $500 million above the 2020 request. So we're on our way, but it's still not enough.
You've done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Well, thanks, staffs. They're the ones who do the work. We take the credit. Yeah. Ms. Barry Bartlett, a founding director of Everglades Foundation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Barley, as in barleycorn.
Barley. Sorry.
Is that on now? Okay, thank you. I'm going to, first thing I'd like to say is you need to get higher boots. And then next year probably even higher, right? I'm going to talk about program versus projects. The Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan consists of 68 modifications to the Central and Southern Florida project and should be treated by Congress, both authorizers and appropriators, as a unified infrastructure program. The requirement that individual SERP projects have to receive separate authorization slows the restoration process down and leaves the Everglades constantly vulnerable to national infrastructure politics. Since 2000, there were 2 7-year gaps where no WRDA passed Congress. That's 14 years of projects that we could not get through. You talk about 19, take away 7. I understand you're trying to up that and have WRDA back on its regular every other year schedule, and I wish you all the luck because the Everglades really needs it. And to make matters worse, in recent years, the Appropriation Committee staff have burdened Everglade projects with New Starts designation, which flies even further in the face of SERP as a single program of modernizing and modifying the CS&F project. The staff is out of their lane and into this committee business when they're saying that Everglades project is a new start. It's part of a long-time program that's been since the 1940s. The SERP planning process is robust enough to produce sound projects that meet the objectives Congress laid out in the 2000 SERP. Let us get on with restoration so we can finish the program for the Everglades, for the millions of acres of federal assets, including national parks, a national marine sanctuary, and a national preserve, and for Florida's economy and for our health issues. On the committee's role in accelerating SERP, the U.S. Army Corps project implementation approach is too slow. In recent years, there have been glimpses of what can be achieved by government resolve to speed up things. In 2012, SERP planning was accelerated and authorized in record time. In 2013, the second phase of Tamiami Trail was accelerated and completed in record time. In 2017, the state of Florida accelerated the Everglades Reservoir planning, moving the plan to authorize in record time. But these bursts of speed, usually the result of political cycles like elections or man-made disasters like algae blooms, are exceptions and not the rule. A sense of urgency with Congress and the Corps needs to be the rule. Regular WRDA cycles, 14-year gaps are costly to taxpayers and destroy economic assets such as America's Everglades. The Everglades and the state of Florida cannot afford to rely on the vagaries of the election cycle, and it should not have to suffer repeated disasters to get the federal government to move faster. The CSNF project, which Congress ordered to be built in the 1940s, is hurting the Everglades and Florida's economy and destroying the Everglades water source for more than 8 million people, and most recently, causing health issues. In 2000, Congress ordered that it be fixed. The Corps listens to Congress, especially to its authorizers. We ask that the committee make it clear to the Corps that it expects the agency to bring a sense of urgency to Everglades restoration, doing everything it can to move every project component faster, because Everglades is not a new start. On the topic of SERP projects that might be ready for authorization in 2020, at this time we're not sure that the Corps will have any projects finished because they want to call everything a new start. We believe that there is still work to do on Lake Okeechobee Watershed Project, for example, before it is ready for authorization. We think the government needs to answer technical and scientific questions about the aquifer storage and recovery. We must accelerate the reservoir project. These are the examples of why individual authorization is a problem. It means that missing the WRDA cycle equates to a minimum of a 2-year wait. And as recent timelines show, it may be as much as 7 to 14 years. With climate change here, the Everglades is the most important component of Florida's resiliency plan. Everglades cannot and should not have to wait any longer. Efficiency and expediency will save taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Everglades restoration is good for Florida's economy, it's good for the health of our citizens, and it's good for the United States of America. SERP is a 50-50 partnership with the state of Florida. So every dollar you put in, we match. We believe Everglades restoration has been so restricted due to delays in WRDA and the new starts provision that restoration should have been finalized decades ago. It has suffered
Wrap up,
because
please.
of the Corps' inability to move these projects forward due to appropriation staff new start restrictions. Delay has and continues to equate to a significantly higher cost. Higher costs equate to inefficiency use of the taxpayer money. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barley. Cheryl Meads, Governing Board member of the South Florida Water Management District. You're on, please.
Thank you. So the district represents 8.7 million people in South Florida, and I'm part of a new governing board that's been put in place by our great governor, DeSantis, who is pushing forward in this crisis to help us ensure that water in the state of Florida never makes anyone sick. I think that's one thing that we can agree on. We can agree on that this is a nonpartisan issue. And Congresswoman, I'm so grateful for you and how you see that so clearly and how you're working across the aisle to help us. We are in a crisis. We have waited once again too late. I want to talk to you quickly. I have more than I can say in 5 minutes, so I'll give you my notes. In 2015, we had a seagrass die-off here. If you look over to your right, you will see the Florida Bay, which is the largest seagrass meadow in the world. We watched the Brazilian rainforest being torn down, and we're horrified, but what you have behind you there is in fact a version of the Brazilian rainforest. It not only is an estuary for creatures, but it provides to our environment fresh air that we need. We cannot not allow seagrass die-offs due to high salinity. We must force these projects through. We must bring water south. We must restore the Everglades, and we must heal the Florida Bay. And there are so many stakeholders involved in this. I always see it like a Rubik's Cube. We turn in one direction, and some people love it, and other people scream in pain. But we have to keep moving this forward. We have to work together across the aisles, all stakeholders. We must work together on this. A wise woman in the audience reminds us that Mark Twain once said, "Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over," and nowhere is that more true than in the state of
California.
Yeah, the state of Florida. So I'm going to run out of time, but I wanted to impress on you that time is our enemy here in Florida, and what is happening here in Florida doesn't just impact Florida, but impacts our entire country and, in fact, the world. So when I run out of time, I will give you my notes. So we have 4 major projects that we're looking at for the next WRDA to continue advancing Everglades restoration, and I'm grateful that you're here to talk about those. We also have some federal opportunities to advance Everglades restorations. We've talked about the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, or the CERP projects, the C-43 Reservoir project to increase the authorized amount of money to $1.1 billion instead of $867 million, and to increase the 902 limit in accordance with the limited reevaluation report. The cost has increased due to the changes in dam regulations, changes in designs and schedules, and more robust project features. This is what happens in Florida. Things change, we stop a project, we put it on a shelf, we go back, we get it again, we dust it off, and all the rules have changed. So we've wasted all of that money in the past because now we have to start over. And when we start over, it costs more money. That's why when Mary tells you that this is taking too long and we keep shelving it, we have to work together to push this stuff forward because time is up. We also have the Lockahachie River Watershed Restoration Project in accordance with the project implementation report and the environmental impact statement. This will provide additional environmental benefits and flows to the nationally designated wild and scenic northwest fork of the Lockahachie River, along with creating habitat, flora, and fauna. The Lake Okeechobee Restoration Project. You are going to hear people talk to you about the legacy phosphorus in the lake. I want you to know that that is a whole different issue. Never let that take your eyes off of this. We have got to put together all the projects we need to clean up not only the water going south, but also the water coming in to the lake. So we are working, the district is working with the DEP and with the people in the north to ensure that our current situation is unsustainable. It is impossible to stay on the path that we're on. I have non-SERP restoration projects plans here. I'm not going to take any more of your time. I'm going to give you my notes instead.
Great.
And that way, instead of listening, you can read them. Thank you for your help. Thank you for coming here and caring enough about us.
You're
to
very
spend your
welcome.
Saturday with us.
Thank you. Dr. Obesekera.
Yes, thank you. I feel sorry every time somebody has to pronounce my name. And you can see why I'm called Obi.
How do you pronounce it?
Obesekera?
Obesekera.
That was pretty good.
Accent is over in the front.
Yes. Anyway, I want to thank the chairwoman and vice chairman for inviting Florida International University. I'm the director of the Sea Level Solution Center, and I've been working on climate change and sea level rise both locally and nationally for some time. I was part of the National Climate Assessment. I also helped develop the sea level rise projections for DOD and NOAA. So I'm familiar with the topic, and I feel like I think many of my esteemed colleagues on the panel emphasize the impacts and importance of sea level rise. But I'm also going to talk about how important it is to incorporate this new environment we are in, the climate change and sea level rise, in planning and design of new WRDA projects and new, the change the policy to incorporate that. So historically, the planning and design of water infrastructure projects did not consider climate change or sea level rise. And I asked somebody at the district who had been there for 50, 60 years, I asked him, why didn't you consider sea level rise in planning the CNSM project? And he said his boss told him that, let's leave that for the next generation. And yes, so I think we are here now. So we have to get out of that what we call stationarity paradigm. In other words, we assume the past climate is an indication of what is to be expected in the future, and we call the new paradigm non-stationary. I think the world of planning and design needs to recognize that as a reality and more proactively incorporate that in the project planning and implementation. I hope that becomes part of the WRDA bill. I've worked with California for Bay Delta issues and also currently working on San Diego Naval Base for a DoD project looking at sea level rise implications. So there we emphasize this very much. So in this new environment, we have increasing sea level rise, storm surge, and like this time of the year when we have king tides, we have slowing down Gulf Stream. And you only have to look at Key Largo, not too far from here. There is a neighborhood that's flooded 45 days. And that is the kind of experiences people are beginning to have. The unfortunate thing is this is going to get worse. And I think this is going to get worse, and that needs to be incorporated into the planning of WRDA projects in the future. And we all know that South Florida, I think it was mentioned here, is one of the most complex systems in the world, probably worse than the Netherlands. I've worked, on this project for 30 years. Prior to coming to FIU, I was at the Water Management District, led the efforts for the modeling for Kissimmee River restoration and SERP. So I think we have one of the complex systems in the world. But now, because we didn't account for that changing conditions, the water infrastructure system is being compromised increasingly, and it's going to get even worse. And I think that needs to be recognized in the WRDA bill and the planning. So let me I'll go to five points before I run out of my time. I think there are good signs that state agency, I think the governor is emphasizing this topic, and the Water Management District is taking on some initiatives to recognize these issues and incorporate that into planning. So in my opinion, there are 5 things that I would like to be considered in the WRDA bill. First, we have a system that has served its design life, the Central and South Florida Flood Control Project. And it's amazing. The Corps must have done a really great job that it's working in some cases, so particularly for flood control. I think it needs to be reevaluated by the Central and South Florida Flood Control Project. That was designed in the 50s and 60s, and that's when the sea level rise was a factor. But we need to reevaluate and develop new regional plans considering future conditions, not what happened in the past. So that needs to be part of the planning process. What is to be expected in the future? Second, the resiliency of the water infrastructure needs to consider what we call compounding effects, because we have sea level rise, storm surge, but extreme rainfall all happening together to make things worse. I think that needs to be part of and there needs to be some improved science on predicting extreme rainfall. And I think I echo others, water quality and natural and nature-based solutions should play important roles in planning. I have 3 more points and I will quickly finish. We need to recognize, and I think that was a quote earlier, Everglades restoration is a win-win situation for everybody, particularly for adapting to climate change and sea level rise. We need to also think resiliency with a systems focus. In other words, we need to design and plan and design water infrastructure that will stay functioning even after a big hazard. So that's not. Okay, one last thing. Well, I will stop there.
Well, no, finish the last, but wrap it up if you would, please.
Yeah, this regional collaboration that was discussed earlier, I think we need better regional collaboration between the federal, state, and local agencies, so we don't have plans that don't act together very well. We cannot afford to have mismatched plans. That's it.
Then you need to make sure you get rid of all the parties.
We don't have parties in it. No.
That's why I wanted you to come here, because working at FIU, there's no parties at FIU.
Yeah, exactly.
Get the work done. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will now proceed, and thank you for all your... I wrote some notes, so I don't know if I'm going to get them all, as there's many things... Well, where do I start? There are many things that you brought up, all of you, that are key. First of all, California has our water wars, north versus south. So we have drought in the south, and we're a desert, typically, and we are fighting for every drop. And talk about conservation, we have evolved with a lot of recycling, water recycling, and conservation and desalination, and you name it, we've done it in Southern California. Whereas Northern California is farming country, they use 80% of the water, and we get 20, and they're still fighting for more. So don't go there. It is.
We have the same problem.
But I'd like to maybe pose a question to the Army Corps eventually, is why do they put old programs under the New Start program? And I'll probably have to ask them to put it in writing and get answers to all of you, because that is something that is puzzling. Why do they?
Because there was some new language put in. There was new language put in I think it was I want to make sure I'm saying this right, in appropriations by a Republican. I'm going to lay a party line on this one. And the staff person for them has insisted that Everglades restoration is a new start.
Okay, would you write to the Republican member and tell him what he's doing to you?
I have. I've talked to even my Democratic. I've talked to everybody about it, Senate side and in the Congress. So House and Senate.
Well, you didn't talk to me.
Not yet, but I am right now.
Another question I had is, do you all meet at all to discuss collectively with the Corps to find out what they're doing? As a group, not just individually. Because I find if we all get together and put our ideas up front, we get better traction than if I go to you or later to you.
So I'll take a shot at that answer. Is yes, we've got a very good working relationship with the Corps, the Water Management District, the Corps.
But do you meet as a group?
We meet as a group on a quarterly basis at least between the main...
Shaking her head, no.
Oh, sorry. Let me expand. From the agency side, to make sure that from the state, from the regional as a water management district, who are the local sponsors, and the Corps are getting together on a quarterly basis. Certainly each of us then take stakeholder input to make sure that we have those management decisions. I think the Corps does a good job with their public hearings on a wide variety of things. We're down to some issues that are high-level management issues that I think you probably heard the repetition of urgency on new starts and other things that rise to a level that can't be handled, I think, at the regional basis.
Well, there's a lot of things that are questionable, especially septic tanks, is how much of it is being targeted to convert them so that you don't have that leaching into the water system or into the aquifer.
So I'll make a general comment about the septic tanks. We saw that as a huge issue. Plus, because we're in the marine sanctuary, we had a high mandate. But it takes dedication of the people and putting the money forward from the people, and that's what it ended up happening here. Not meaning to point fingers at anybody, but many of our people to the north are going, oh, I can't afford that. Well, we couldn't afford it either, but it was our livelihood to make it happen.
Thank you, Deb. If I may, Chairwoman, we had a meeting this week in Washington, D.C. with all the group of the county commissioners from all over the state, and that's exactly what they were saying, that it's too expensive. But Monroe County has foot up the bill, and it's actually used as a model nationally for investing in their water infrastructure, converting all of their septic to
Central.
To Central. And Miami-Dade County, which I've been saying in a lot of our hearings, is that we have 90,000 septic tanks in Miami-Dade County. And so, if I may, I want to ask a question to Jose, because you have more of the understanding of the county level, and maybe in the state NOAA. What can we do if we provide the funding at the federal level so that we can expedite
Or at least
converting?
a match fund.
A match fund, yeah. Because I know that this is part of the reason why a lot of our beaches are closing, and there's fecal content in the water.
So absolutely. So I think one of the things, in Monroe County, it's no longer an issue. It's what Miami-Dade, frankly, should have been on that road for a long time.
It's coming our way
Yeah,
from you.
right. And not enough state support in doing that, and they went ahead and did it. I mean, there was funding, there were some policy mechanisms in order to facilitate that happening. But I think what I would say is that the problem of septic tanks is something that has a high level of interest from the subcommittee that I serve on in the Senate. It's something that we're going to come back to this year. And as you said, Congresswoman, there's a study that came out. I don't know who actually commissioned the study, but I think it was last year or earlier this year, that showed just how critical the septic tank issue is, and it's directly related to the rise in our water table with sea level rise, which is accelerating more than originally predicted. And so it is an urgent, again, I'm going to come back to the public health, and that's one of the things that I'm mentioning, is that this is not an environmental issue, just out there. This is an environmental issue that affects our public health, and it is a critical thing that we need. It's a regulatory thing we need at the state level. There may be funds as well, but I'll stop there.
And it's actually also contributing to the die-off. Apparently, they're finding some fecal bacteria that's affecting the coral reef. So it's definitely an urgent matter that we need to deal with. I would love to get commitment from NOAA for us to have that discussion so that we can work together in funding.
Maybe another hearing or a meeting with the parties that are involved to find out what they know and what are they going to do about it.
I do have to just be honest with you about one thing. We had to be forced to do it.
Yes.
We did not do it because we are eco-warriors. We did it because the federal government told us you must do it, and here is your timeline. And our community was one of the last communities to do it. And it was because of the expense. And right now there are 7,000 of us in Islamorada, and we currently have a debt of $73 million still in yet. So just so you'll know, it's something where you really have to work with communities.
Well, if this priority was made, and it's going to be made by the state, by the governor, in the subcommittee, maybe you could suggest to them that they involve the federal government on the issue of public health, because that's got to be a very important issue. And involve the media to let the media know so they can involve the public and get the public support for the change. Because nothing happens without them approving either assessment or anything that might. So, go ahead.
And one issue with respect to being forced to do it, that is absolutely true. And there was an effort for a local government who will remain nameless, that where half of the city is still on septic and half is not. And there was an effort to try to tax themselves to fix that problem, and it was defeated, right, at the polls. And so I think that it absolutely is something that is going to have to, be some sticks along with carrots in order to get that done, because it's not easy to convince folks when it's not something that they can see and feel right now.
Well, that's why that you would have to make the media aware of the problem so they understand that eventually they won't have drinking water, if that's what it comes down to.
So Cheryl was exactly right. We had this mandate come down and say, you will clean up your waters. And it took us, I don't know, I can't remember how many years. I know I sat on council 5 years before we actually got anything through. But it also takes the dedication of the elected official to say, I'm sorry, this is what we have to do. Now, once we started on that project, we got everybody on board, realizing that without the water, we didn't have anything.
You wouldn't have
But
economy.
it does take the mandate, and I tell you, we sit here and say, not picking on anybody, is why is the mandate not till 2025 north of us? This is ridiculous. All of that stuff comes our way. So,
Say something about that. I was a developer in Orange County in Orlando, Florida. And in the 1970s, the city of Orlando said the developers had to build the sewage plant. And in return, you got so many
Points.
you're right, ERUs, and when you sold things, because you couldn't, it was that capacity with what you had, and then the extra capacity went to the developers who put up the money. And so there are ways to get money from other people, too, who are actually
Public-private partnerships.
Can I
Well-
add something real quickly on that? So this septic tank issue is becoming a critical issue. In Miami-Dade County produced a report. You're right that there are thousands in certain areas, particularly in low-income areas, and they cannot afford to, connect to the regional sewer system. But there are three issues that are there. One is the data needs to be enhanced because we don't have good data. Updated, where the septic tanks are, and more importantly, how old they are and how deep they are. And the other thing is the contaminant migration is not well understood because you have a lot of canals. So we have written a proposal to EPA to take some area of Miami-Dade County to understand that and see how those are impacting places like Biscayne Bay.
Well, shouldn't EPA be part of the discussion?
Definitely, they should.
Because it involves other agencies that could shed a light into what they feel is happening, what they perceive to be happening.
Totally agree.
But aren't public utilities also a big problem here? Not more than
Yeah, the
things even?
Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department is very interested in looking at this. One area is the problem is so big, they're trying to see if we can prioritize which area needs to be connected first.
Well, maybe upgrade the wastewater systems?
Yes, and
Well, you should maybe have an idea of how old they are. And I realize that this area was long developed before California, but even we're having to look at the infrastructure because it's crumbling and it's not helping. You have a lot of water leaks in the delivery system, so we lose a lot of water. So there are things that we have to look at, and we should involve all agencies at one point together discussing the issue, and it be more than 5 minutes.
Madam Chairwoman, I would just mention your comment at the beginning. It all comes down to resources. So Florida, like California and other states, but particularly large growth states like Florida and California, where we had a boom of growth after World War, you have a whole bunch of infrastructure put in place at one time that ages out in one time, and wastewater and drinking infrastructure, but particularly wastewater infrastructure, have been notorious 30 years ago for utilities or local communities ignoring the degradation and maintenance of that. I'm
Well,
sure
that's
you
why
see the
it's
same thing.
important for you to make sure that that is out in the public to realize what is happening so they can raise the holy hell, to the elected officials.
So we have holy hell.
Where'd they been?
We have enforcement. The thing
But
is,
it's just started. This should have been done a long time ago.
and so I would just urge you to think about, as discussions of infrastructure funding occur at the federal level, to think about.
Talk to the administration.
Yep, absolutely.
Talk to the administration, because we're ready to put the money in if they will follow and put it in.
We would be happy to join forces
From
with
day
you on
one,
that.
in the water subcommittee, we've been talking about septic tanks and the investments that we need to do to upgrade. And I keep bringing up what's happening in Miami-Dade, using Monroe as an example. Actually, and this is something that I want to turn to now, shifting a little bit from septics. I introduced a bill that requires 20%, and this has never been done, 20% of any investments in water infrastructure has to be used for green water infrastructure. So, and we're hopeful that it's going to pass in the House and that the Senate will bring
Well,
it
that's
back.
another story. The Senate is sitting on all the bills right now. So you know it's political. And you have to fight that because that's where the money is. If they don't approve it, we're sunk.
So the more I will work with your staff, the more we can tell joint stories between multiple states about the importance of infrastructure.
Also the Senate. You've got to convince the senators to fight for it because it is important to you.
Absolutely.
The two senators.
The other thing I have in mind was the Harbor Maintenance Fund, and you've alluded to it. You don't know how long we've been fighting for equity because L.A. and Long Beach harbors get less than 1% return. Less than 1%. And we've tried to make that clear to them that it's a deep water already, so they don't have much dredging. And they're set on having dredging done with that much funding, but we don't need it. So we're fighting to get that changed to do other improvements in the fort. And you talk about the Chinese. Over 10 years ago, I heard they were building a seawater port, deep water port in Ensenada. And everybody went up in arms about it, and they did nothing. Then the Panama Canal was deepened. And now they can't get the big ships through yet because they didn't quite measure right or they did something wrong. Excuse me. I've been there twice, and it's a marvelous feat of accomplishment, but somehow we've got to be aware that some of that may mean trade to you and to California and to all the other ports. We should keep an eye out because they will try to take over our economy, and that can't happen.
Oh, yeah.
And this is an important point. Debbie?
I wanted to ask, and maybe the Army Corps can be helpful in this, and all of you, I'm sure you have a lot to say, but what are the challenges to fully implementing and completing the Everglades Restoration Project, the SERP?
Getting funding and a consistent level of funding so that we can plan and keep on moving through the process. So that is a challenge, and getting individual projects approved and the process that takes.
And what can we do now that we have approved the funding? You'll be receiving the funding, you're counting on that, and if we have it continuously, what is it that we can actually do together so that we can expedite the process and complete it? Because when I met with the Army Corps in my office after we got the $200 million, they said, well, it's going to be at least 2 years until we just complete the plan. So I was very alarmed by that.
With the anticipated $200 million, we'll be moving forward on getting to a construction contract on the Central Everglades South components, which is critical to getting the water moving south. So that's a very key project. Otherwise, we will be and doing the design of the EA reservoir.
Right, the design. That's why I was confused, because if it had been approved years ago, why are we still putting the plan together? That's my confusion. Like, why are we still spending time?
Specifications that you can put to give to a construction contractor to build. So that's the design phase, is doing the design and specs after you've got the authorization.
It's the authorization.
These are authorized, and we're in that design phase and ready to go to construction, and we have a lot of construction going on, but the extra funds will help accelerate doing some components of the Indian River Lagoon South project up near the St. Lucie, as well as Central Everglades South.
Can I add something, please? So, some really great news. engineers at the district have. So one of the things that happened is what was approved in certain steps, like baking a cake, right? Certain orders of addition. But what the district has done is now we've re-looked at that, and instead of starting with a certain project, we see that we can start sooner if we start with the stormwater treatment area. That will speed up time. So we have put in our permits for our permits to start there with the stormwater treatment area. And we're waiting for those permits to go through a process. And the process is very complicated and takes I don't know if the Lieutenant Colonel would like to speak. I think you're best to speak to your process, but we are trying to, encourage them to get us, because we're ready to turn dirt.
So that's why we're here. So anything that we can do, and I want to, and I'm so glad, that's why I wanted the governor's office to be here represented, because we need to work together on this. It's critical. Anything that we can do to help expedite, whether it's weekly phone calls, whatever it is,
pushing forward with our NEPA and EIS project or process. The key was that the STA, so that storm treatment area, along with the EA reservoir, keeping those linked together is what's going to be the fastest thing that we can get us together to push those projects forward, as opposed to trying to decouple the storm treatment area. But what it comes down to is we knew we needed some time to do some study. It was about 19 months that we thought that we said we would need back in January, and so we'll have it by May of 2020. But we're going as fast as we can, as fast as our process will allow.
And
let's keep the pressure up.
Funding?
we approved.
I don't believe it's a funding issue at this time.
Not a funding issue.
We approved, yeah.
So I would say I'll adopt your phrase of holy hell. We've got holy hell in ample amounts here at the state, and I think when you empower a state, we can always move more quickly because we have a greater sense of urgency. And again, I've got 3,000 folks on the ground in my agents here in Florida. We're built to do things more quickly for the state because of that sense of urgency. We're now trying to be the third state to take over the 404 wetland permitting program, because in the state we permit at sub 10 days. On our end, the Army Corps is a couple of years maybe, or a year plus.
18 months a year, because again,
and that is, I don't mean that in a pejorative. We are different beasts in large part because the state, every day you walk out your door and you see the importance of the issue, and that creates a sense of urgency throughout the state. And so the more we can have overcome things like new starts, the more we can come up with, from the leadership level down, ways to send block grants to the state to say, hey, we're in a cost share program, but in this instance, can the federal government share go to the state, hold the state accountable, but let the state do what it does well, have the urgency, get the project done more quickly. I think if we're going to see progress, we've got to start recognizing that you're not going to be able to totally transform a federal side that has a purpose and has a function, but you're not going to be able to.
It moves very slowly.
So empower the state to do it. Don't say, hey, we will be able to change the process that moves slowly, because you'll be able to improve it, but it is what it is. Instead, try to change the system to empower the state to do what it does well, which is move quickly and have a sense of urgency.
But no, with all due respect, I worry because leadership at the state level matters, right? And I'm hopeful, and I've seen some positive steps by this governor, but the previous administration was a disaster for water quality. So I just worry that if you give all the power to the state, depending on who's the governor at that moment, we're not going to see immediate positive changes for the betterment of the entire population of the state.
So, Congressman, but part of it is go back to the process. The process is they can't do anything until it's authorized. And if everything is a new start, that is the slowdown right there. If you look at it, that this is a modification.
Let's look at changing
let's
start changing the process at the federal level.
At the federal level.
And we need to go back and change that somehow. Maybe in the next WRDA we can infuse and reverse that. That's something we must look at.
I want to empower you to use what you need and give you the resources so that we can move as swiftly as possible, because I understand that you have to have proper planning, but still.
Yeah, and that goes back to what the doctor said about, the CSNF needs to be reevaluated, and that's what Everglades Restoration is. It's a reevaluation of that project, trying to make it better and work with what we have now, the new resiliency problems with climate change.
Can I make one real quick point on the idea of empowering the state to take over on projects? I don't care who's governor, what administration it is. The Department of Environmental Protection is always going to be held to the standard of the Federal Clean Water Act.
Is there funding there?
So funding will definitely change, but as far as the quality of the project and whether it'll be environmentally protective, we're always going to be held to the standard of the Clean
It
Water
will
Act.
be slowed down if there is the budget.
They're
Yes,
easing the
I agree with-
protections of the Clean Water Act right now, which is
Yes.
very, very dangerous, especially for us in Florida. They're doing that as we speak. We actually had a hearing on that. So you may have the best intentions here, but the Environmental Protection Agency, as we speak, they're trying to repeal all the protections that we had for clean water and air that were instituted back in, I think, 2014.
Yep.
I will just
Well-
state I'm very proud of the protections we have in Florida.
Well, under the subcommittee that I chair, I have jurisdiction over the Army Corps and over EPA. I can tell you the Army Corps is excellent, responsive. They give us answers. They work with us. EPA, forget it. And right now, as she's saying, they're going to try to turn back the protections of groundwater, of any water. So I kind of like this round table because you're able to discuss and get more information more than the 5 minutes. And it's important for us to know that. But let me tell you, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Debbie.
Yeah, and could I just say one thing before you start, though, because what he said, he's not going to be done until May, right on the reservoir, but they told him he only had 90 days, that the Corps only had 90 days. So, and this is what happens, it slips.
Well, ma'am, if I can clarify, it was 9 days to submit that initial report, and that report said that we would need 19 months to get everything done, to make sure we're all speaking the same.
Well, let me tell you, government at any level, maybe not local government, runs very slow.
Local government isn't a whole lot better.
I can remember, I have a situation in my area with a dam that I've been pushing for over 12 years. And I'm the ranking member in the committee. 12 years to get things to happen in that dam.
So I have a habit of speaking truth to power, and it's unpleasant for me, but I got to tell you, not everyone wants to send water south. Remember, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting over, and
Again,
some people...
tell Californians that.
Yeah. So it's the Rubik's Cube,
Yeah.
where you start making progress in one direction and a stakeholder will say, that's not in our best interest. And so that plays into this as well, as long as we keep that in mind. Some people want the water and don't want it to go south and would rather send it east and west to those poor estuaries than they would send it south. So we are working with everyone at the table, and we have a seat for everyone, and we are willing to be fair to everyone. And we want everyone to have water, and we want that water to be clean.
Well, my staff informs me that we're hoping to mark up the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, the SRF, $20 billion over 5 years. And your green infrastructure water bill is part of that. So hopefully we'll get marked up next month. So keep your fingers crossed and maybe send letters of support. They help. Yes. Anybody else have any comment before we go to public?
I was just going to make a real short, I promise to keep it short. On Cheryl's point, it is true. We understand that we can't get everything that we used to have coming through the Everglades, that it has to be a shared issue, that there's people who don't want water in certain areas, but that doesn't, we have to protect the environment and protect that water source. We do understand that.
Okay, now, I'll ask, Debbie, you had somebody you wanted to introduce?
No, I know that Alex wanted to say a few words here today. If, Alex, you want to introduce yourself and make some comments, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A for everyone in the room. Thank you so much for being here. We want to hear from you as well.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Madam Chairman and staff for being here today.
Chairwoman, please.
Yes, ma'am. I apologize.
No problem.
My name is Alex Gillen. I'm the executive director of Friends of the Everglades. We are a 50-year-old nonprofit started by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas to help out in this problem in the Everglades. We break the problem down into three parts: infrastructure, operations, and water quality. So infrastructure is largely being handled by CERP, the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. We are going to be about 20 years into that plan and not have completed one of the 68 projects, as we've kind of discussed here. So it's going slow, and if you look at the out years of full funding at $200 million at the state and federal level, we're looking at 30 to 40 to 50 years to solve this, depending on revisions of cost estimates. So what we're pushing here at Friends is a revision to the authorization from 1948, the Central and Southern Florida Project. Now, Senator Bob Graham, who has studied this project his entire life, has called for Congress to revisit this authorization and start that process, which would be under your jurisdiction in the WRDA bill. Currently, the project is authorized for irrigation, navigation, recreation, enhancement of fish and wildlife, and flood control. And so when you think about all those things together, you can't do them all to the maximum extent possible, so you have to balance. And the Corps has done a very bad job, in my opinion, in their regulation schedules, balancing human health and balancing the needs of our environment. What is really, if you look at the system in terms of winners and losers, the big winner in the system is the Everglades agricultural area, and that is the land south of Lake Okeechobee that is the former river of grass that is about 700,000 acres, and it requires basically perfect conditions in order to farm it. I actually have my copy of the CNSF report, which is a really interesting, vague read. I can give you a copy, ma'am. That needs to be updated. And so it actually says in there that if you don't have pumps to drain the field in the wet season, and you don't have irrigation to provide water in the dry season, you can't farm the land. So we manage this entire system around this 500,000 acres of farmland, and it is at the expense of all these other communities in Florida. In my community in Stewart on the St. Lucie, we artificially connect with a 20-mile canal that is designed to get rid of lots of fresh water. Well, what's happened is last year Lake Okeechobee was covered in a 90% algal bloom. And this algae is actually a bacteria. It's blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. We had 7 dogs get sick from exposure and 1 dog die. And so there's 2 health issues going on. One are neurodegenerative diseases such as ALS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. The other are liver failure. And so we're not just seeing it here. Miss Captor in Toledo has this going on. Blue-green algae is on the rise nationally and internationally. It's exacerbated by climate change. So what we're encouraging the committee, the subcommittee to consider for WRDA 2020 is revising this Central and Southern Florida Project priorities and make human health a priority. And let's use the capacity in the system. So right now there is existing capacity in the system that we could use to get water to Florida Bay. We could get water to the Caloosahatchee to improve the environment, lower the lake, reduce the likelihood of discharges, and everybody wins except those few ag producers that are relying on, pretty extensive water supply. So I'll finish my remarks there, ma'am, and thank you for coming, and thank you, Congresswoman. And
thank you for your remarks, and if you have the report, we'd like to see it.
Yes, ma'am.
That will help us get a better understanding of what you have proposed. Audience members, you're welcome to speak. Anybody? Don't be shy.
Yes, Steve. Can someone give the microphone? Oh, you're going.
Yeah,
Sorry. Okay.
I'm a piece of the puzzle, and I thank you for being here today. I represent South Dade agriculture mostly, and I have since the beginning of Everglades restoration. And I'm not sure, or maybe you all know that sheet flow, that's above groundwater, flows to the southwest. Below ground in our aquifer, which is like a sponge, flows to the southeast. And when you raise the sheet flow in the park, that sheet flow follows across into our aquifer, and it can cause what we call in-ground water flooding. We have crops that the water level could get into roots. We have avocados especially that water can get into the roots. And we're just a piece of the puzzle. And you talk about Everglades restoration, and I'm thinking, I've seen pictures, I collect old pictures, where Miami International Airport was Everglades. And now we have Blue Lagoon lakes. Well, there were rock pits that were dug to fill Miami International Airport. And you can't really restore the Everglades the way it was without a pump system forever. I'd like to have the diesel concession forever for all the pumps that will run. But it's so complex with so many different people have an agenda. Our agenda in South Dade is flooding and groundwater. If the groundwater is closer to the top of the ground and we get heavy rains, then we're going to have above ground flooding. So that's my piece of it.
Well, thank you, sir. Water is life. Either the business or the community, it is life. And without it, you do not have economy, you don't have tourism. Very simple. Anybody else? The gentleman in the back?
Hi, thank you all for coming. My name is Captain Steve Friedman. I'm representing the Florida Keys Fishing Guides Association, and I really appreciate your efforts and what you're doing for us. And I want to encourage you to increase your resolve. We've talked about the urgency of this matter. Some of you may not be in the positions that you're in as some of these projects are going on, so I think that it can't be understated how urgent that we need this clean water. Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to ask you, are you aware that that there's no regulation on how much agriculture can take in the water from Lake Okeechobee?
No, I did not, but that doesn't surprise me because the same in California. Well, actually, California deems first water rights to the first water rights holders, and most of them are farmers, conglomerate farmers.
Well, I would also ask you to try and understand the larger picture here. It's about Everglades restoration, but $200 million a year is part of what we need. But we have Big Cypress National Park next door that is having seismic testing going on. We have a Turkey Point nuclear facility right next to Biscayne National Park where we have a canal system that cools a reactor, which I'm not sure if everybody in this room is aware is the only one in the world. And that should tell you that that is not the way to do it. We're seeing scientific evidence of outflow damage to grasses in Biscayne. And yet we're going through National Regulatory Commission meetings urging them not to allow an extended permit on this so that they will build a enclosed cooling system. So all of these factors I think you need to understand. And I'll just finish with this. I understand that you're going on an outing afterwards with some airboats, and that should be a wonderful occasion. Hopefully the weather will hold out for you. But I would urge you next time, because I think it's precious time that you're here, to please come to the end of the pipeline. Come to Florida Bay. See what we're seeing and what we're witnessing. And what I'm witnessing now is actually good. We're seeing increased water flows of fresh water thanks to the Army Corps. They're pumping water through here. I was standing at the dock in Flamingo last week, and for the first time in my 20-year career, I saw an alligator. It was not a crocodile. So we're getting fresh water. That's good. But we need more of it, and we need it faster, so please increase your resolve. Thank you.
Sir, do you connect with your senator?
Anatole Flores?
The senator?
Oh, yes.
To be able to give him your facts of what you've seen and what your fishermen folks have witnessed in your travels.
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair. Yes, as a matter of fact, we have reached out to all of our officials, and any day, any time that they wanted to.
Your senators are key in being able to do the permitting.
Are you talking about our federal? Are you talking about
state?
State. Okay. Thank you.
Are permitting for. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Come on, we've got time, guys.
No. Take advantage, people.
Speak up. Forever hold your peace.
Thank you. Good morning still, Madam Chair, Congresswoman. Thank you. I'm a fifth-generation Key West conch myself, and I thank you for giving me an excuse to drive. I live in Broward now, to drive back home. Thank you. I just wanted to underscore some of the things that I've heard this morning with respect to the New START language. This is, I think it's really important to not let that get super bureaucratic, because it is going to become a big problem for us. And there is some language in the Senate bill right now that tries to address it, but it would be, I'm sorry? The Senate Appropriations Bill that's sort of sitting there. There is some language that attempts to address it, but I think a signal from the authorizers, I think it was Mary who said the appropriators are getting in the lane of the authorizers by sort of imposing this New START slowdown, I think would be very helpful. The other thing that I wanted to say with respect to the sense of urgency that the committee could potentially imbue into the core is that the 90-day, the WARDA bill from 2018 required a 90-day report on the EAA reservoir. It allowed the Corps to go ahead and do the report it wanted to do, but it put a time limit. It said you can only take 90 days because we're in a hurry. There's a sense of urgency. And what they did in 90 days was they wrote you a letter that said, we're going to take 19 months. And so that's the kind of thing that here in Florida we hit. It feels like a brick wall when you hit that stuff. And so we just need the committee's help to just feel, like you guys are behind us, we're behind you, just constantly reminding the Corps that we are in a state of a pretty constant emergency in Florida. We have a plan, we have a consensus, we're all rowing in the same direction. We just need that sense of urgency.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, and I did meet with the Army Corps to give them exactly that same message, and I will continue to do that. And if you want to respond to that, I know that you're here. You guys are doing the best that you can here locally. We have to do our part in D.C. So if you want to respond to that, no. No, look, I have to tell you, when I met with the Army Corps in Washington in my office, they're engineers. They look at everything from their lens. They're engineers. They take it seriously, but they want to do the proper planning. They want to follow the proper steps. So it's going to take a lot of push from us just to remind them the urgency of our issue. And I think that they do, but because they're engineers, they look at it in a different way.
Well, right? Not only that, but the funding has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, but they have it now. I mean, they will once the Senate. Yeah. Yeah, and the bureaucracy, I have to say, everywhere in government, and I come from...
It's worse in Washington.
Yeah. We're pushing, but you have people that will help expedite that. Yes?
The only thing I'd like to add...
Wait a minute. Wait.
Oh, okay. Chairwoman.
It's on.
No. Oh, yes. Thank you for being here. I'm Kimberly Mitchell with the Everglades Trust. I wanted to go back to what Noah was describing for you, or throwing it out there as an idea. And I understood your comments, Congresswoman, about the permitting. But if there was a way to do a block grant where larger pots of money could be dedicated back to the state and the South Florida Water Management District as the local partner, massive projects could get going, in our lifetime.
If we had a magic wand, we'd get the politics out of it. It could be done.
Right. Didn't this meeting start? Somebody said there's no politics in water, and I said
water has no politics.
Oh, it has no politics. In Florida, it's and that's what we do.
It shouldn't have.
It shouldn't. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank Debbie for inviting me out here and making sure that we get a briefing. I haven't had a chance to really go over everything, but it's quite certain that we've got work to do, and she will do a great job in pushing me. That my staff is here. Camille Navis, stand up.
Yeah,
my staff.
Yourselves,
introduce yourselves.
It's important for them.
Water Resources Subcommittee, Transportation and Infrastructure.
Introduce yourself.
Navis Bermudez with the Water Resources Subcommittee of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
Good morning. I'm Camille Tootin. I'm also on the committee. Navis handles mostly EPA. I do the core for the committee and the chairwoman and vice chair.
And Camille is an engineer.
Camille should have never said that she handled the Army Corps. That was. Give your number. Give your phone number, Camille.
Hi, I'm Courtney Fogwell. I'm the Congresswoman Debbie McChrystal's Powell Legislative Director and Deputy Chief of Staff.
Hold it up.
Oh. Shall I repeat? I'm Courtney Fogwell. I'm Congresswoman Debbie McChrystal Powell's Legislative Director and Deputy Chief of Staff.
Yeah.
I'm Alexa Williams. I also am with the Water Subcommittee for Ms. Napolitano.
And I hope you notice they're all women.
They're all women. We mean business. We're not going to let anyone or anything stop us.
No, that's assured. But does anybody else have any more questions?
The other committee staff who are here.
Oh.
Yes, and my district staff, please. Any other staff members, please.
Howdy, I'm Bobby Joe. I'm Congresswoman McChrystal Powell's Director for Constituent Services. So happy to be here.
Victor?
I'm Ian Bennett. I know some of you. I'm the Minority Staff Director on the Water Resources Subcommittee in TNI.
Mm-hmm. And Victor Sarmiento also with the committee as well. Thank you for having us.
I'm Lonnie Alexum, the Director of Travel Security and Facilities for the committee. Thanks. And we're escorted today by the Colonel. He's the Chief for House Army Liaison. He is actually a Florida native, and he has a major...
He knows all the ins and outs.
Sorry, ma'am?
He knows all the ins and outs.
He has a major who's with him, who's also helping on the escort, and we also are pleased to have the Colonel's daughter with us. Yeah. She is a student here in Florida and studying Chinese.
Great.
My name is Oscar. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for Congresswoman Debbie McChrystal Powell.
I'm Leah Moeller. I'm actually the Congresswoman's aide in the Keys, so I'm the Director of Community Outreach. I didn't bring cards for a reason. Just kidding. I'll give you guys all my number. You can call me.
Get their names.
And I'm Natalia Vanegas, the District Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Debbie McChrystal Powell.
So you know we're well represented, and hopefully you will get their names and numbers. So you have any questions or any follow-up, and we certainly want to hear from you. But is there anybody else? You have something to give to us? Any other comments? Any closing remarks you might have?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize one of the comments from this gentleman, how complex the system is. You know, it's a highly constrained system for the way it was designed and developed, and it's, you know, those constraints are going to get worse. But, you know, if you look at that map over here, you can see how much storage we have lost in terms of, you know, we get sometimes 6 feet of water in the lake in one wet season, and there is no place to put it. And so I just want to emphasize how important storage is in the system so we can improve the flexibility in operation. So otherwise you will just, you know, make some, you know, fine tuning at the edges of operations. It's going to be very difficult to solve these problems without additional storage to put this extra water.
I wish California had the water you have, because in the last 3 decades, Southern California is still using the same amount of water used, and it's increased. It's for the county alone, there's about 12 million people in that county, and still using the same amount of water. But that's because they went into conservation, recycling, desalination, and education to be able to face the fact that we have no more water. Mother Nature just gives us any more water. We just recycle it, but we abuse it sometimes. And we need to be sure that we clean it, especially in the areas of bases. We are learning that PFAS is having a great impact on the water. I don't know whether you have it here. We're having a problem in California. So that it's things that we got to be aware of, that these things have to stop being used so that we don't contaminate our water further.
Yeah, I just want to make a point. Even in this area, the communities have done very well in terms of conservation. Per capita water use has continuously gone down in the last 5-10 years. So I think kudos to some of the counties on the southeast, but we probably need to do more. I'm very familiar with the California issue because you have mega droughts as well. So.
Continuing drought.
I mean, it's almost a sin to know that we have so much water available and it's under so much threat because of the toxins that have been put in and because of the delays on completion of the reservoir. It's, you have a state that is struggling to just conserve the little amount of water that they have, and we have this abundance of water that has green-blue algae coming out of the lake, and we don't have enough infrastructure to collect that water from storms and the rainfall. So that's why we're addressing those issues.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And I think one of the things that I would say, just in terms of urgency, I know part of the message is on new starts. I think that's a very clear message, and I think that kind of goes with the idea of trying to fund the program versus the individual projects to the extent that that's possible. And part of the reason for that, in my view, part of the reason for the urgency is not just climate, not just the fact that climate's accelerating, not just the fact that we are in permanent crisis here. I appreciated some of the remarks from the public, but also our politics here in the state of Florida, right? Is that the sort of water wars that we have been fighting, we are not always on offense, if I can say that. And so I think that looking at the future, as Dr. Obi was saying, that the current state of affairs is not always going to be the state of affairs we always have. That's also true of our politics. We are in a place in our politics here in the state level, in the Florida legislature, where we can be on offense. That may not always be the case. I hate to say that. I'm working as hard as I can. It is not a partisan issue. I will tell you that very clearly. It is not. But I think that for those of us at this table, those of us who really care and want to make this happen, the more quickly we move, the more quickly we build in those commitments that cannot easily be undone in the future is important. I guess I'll just leave it at that. I think you know what I'm saying.
I just want to briefly clarify on, we enjoy a very good relationship with Army Corps, with EPA, with the federal administration, with our local delegations. My point is there are some items that local government, state government has the ability to do faster or better than the federal government. There are other items that the federal government does better, and I think when we're looking at efficiencies, we need to figure out how to divvy those best up for the point of urgency. And so your takeaway, or my takeaway from your comments is, one, we'll stay engaged with your office, and we'll make sure there aren't politics inserted. Certainly, we enjoy a good relationship with all our agencies. If there are items where we can be of help, we'd love to be of help, and certainly we'll come to you for help also. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the peanut gallery?
Dr. Obe, if you can submit the work that you've been doing on sea level rise and resiliency, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Well, now that we've had coming to a close, I'd like to remind you that you're welcome to submit comments to this committee, and we will take them under advisement, and I'm sure we will be back with you if you address them to the committee, because that's what we have staff for. They do the work, and I take the credit. Thank you, everybody, for today's discussion. This has been great. I like the format of a roundtable because everybody gets a chance to discuss items that are important and give a different viewpoint in different areas. We will take your comments back and, of course, the guidance, and we move forward with the legislation for next year. And thank you, Debbie. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be here. She asked me. I came, and she's doing a great job, so please, please take care of her for me. Thank you for hosting us. Committee stands adjourned.
I would just like to thank you, ladies, for coming, and hopefully next time you can stay a little longer and actually enjoy the Keys. I know you're down here a lot, but you're only here this morning, and then you're out and gone again, so please come back and visit.
Don't forget, this is only a weekend we spent down here. I miss going back home. I go home every weekend.
I understand.
To the district, and that's to take care of my district. Otherwise, I won't get reelected.
I understand, but